Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 minutes past 3. I suggest that we begin today's meeting. Item number 1, if there are no objections from your side, I propose to adopt the agenda as it stands. Item number 2, my announcements. Our meeting is, as usual, being web-streamed, except for the in-camera point on the agenda. I would like to remind all members that speakers lists are established by the chair. During the committee meeting, you will be invited to raise your hand during the agenda item. The Secretariat will assist me in compiling the speakers lists in accordance with the floor requests. We can then move on already to our Inter-Parliamentary committee meeting, which will take place from now till approximately 5:15. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to open this Inter-Parliamentary committee meeting and welcome all the colleagues from the national parliaments attending this session remotely, and also welcome the members of the European Parliament here in the room in Brussels. A few technical remarks before we start our discussions. As I just mentioned, our meeting is being web-streamed. We have interpretation in English, French, German, Italian, Danish, Greek, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Swedish, Czech, Hungarian, Lithuanian, Latvian, Polish, Slovak, Slovene, Bulgarian, Romanian, and Croatian. Parliamentarians from the Western Balkan countries and Turkey have been invited to join this meeting, so there is also passive interpretation from Bosnian, Montenegrin, Serbian, and Turkish, as well as Finnish, that you can speak in those languages but cannot listen to interpretation into those languages. Finally, I would like to stress that the interpreters, as always, rely on the quality of the sound and video of remote participants in order to get your message across. And please do be aware that phone interventions and audio-only connections will not be interpreted. Let us now start this inter-parliamentary meeting focusing on EU enlargement policy in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It is a great pleasure to welcome colleagues from the national parliaments of our member states, the Western Balkan countries, as well as Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, and Turkey. They are all connected remotely. At this stage, I would like to welcome also our guest, the Commissioner for Enlargement and Neighbourhood, Oliver Varhey. Is he already with us, or is he connected? He's connected remotely. So a warm welcome to you, dear Oliver Varhey. He will join us with an opening address online, and I would also like to welcome Maciej Popovski, the Acting Director General of DG NEAR, who will intervene at the end of our debate. Colleagues, I think we can all agree that this discussion couldn't be more timely just a few days after a historic decision to grant candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova and a European perspective to Georgia. Regrettably, no breakthrough on the opening of membership negotiations with North Macedonia and also Albania has been achieved. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has led to a new geopolitical reality, pushing the EU to rethink its enlargement policy and its geography. It has also reinforced the link between the neighbourhood and the enlargement policies. The EU membership applications of the three of the Eastern Partnership countries should give a new impetus to the enlargement process, including the continued accession of the Western Balkan partners. Let me finally mention that the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament has started deliberations on the future of enlargement, and draft recommendations on the new EU strategy for enlargement will be discussed right after this meeting. That's all from my side, and I would now like to give the floor to Commissioner Varhey for his introductory remarks for, let's say, 7 minutes. Oliver, the floor is yours.
Honourable Chair, dear David, honourable members of the European Parliament, honourable members of national parliaments, and of course distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Over the last days we had important decisions taking the EU's enlargement policy back high on the agenda of the EU. Last week the European Council endorsed the opinions of the European Commission on Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova, and Georgia's application for EU membership. All three were given the perspective to become EU member states. Ukraine and Moldova were granted candidate status on the understanding that major reform steps will be taken. Georgia will be granted candidate status once the necessary reforms are done. These are decisions that some, perhaps many, thought unlikely some months ago. But historic times bring about historic decisions. The three countries now should make full use of the opportunities created by these decisions. Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia want to join the European Union. They consider the European Union and the EU membership to be the most important and most reliable tool for security and prosperity in the long term. We have treated these applications very seriously, but not as business as usual. We worked hard and did our utmost to deliver an answer to the Council, who had asked the Commission to prepare these opinions as a matter of urgency. We prepared a rigorous and robust assessment, applying the exact same methodology that we have been using in previous cases. All three applicants were assessed on the same criteria based on their own merits. Now, with the European perspective, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia are set on a firm and reliable track towards the EU. Let me recall that the accession process remains based on established criteria and conditions, the so-called Copenhagen Criteria. These criteria, first of all, are political criteria, meaning how the country ensures democracy, the rule of law, protection of human rights and minorities. Second, the economic criteria, to assess whether there is a functioning market economy capable of resisting competitive market pressures within the EU. And third, the so-called acquis criteria, meaning the capability of applying our legislation, the EU law, as is on the ground fully. Based on these criteria, the three Commission opinions, which are now endorsed by the European leaders, identify key reform areas for Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, where more efforts will need to be done so that they can make progress on their EU path. We will follow closely their progress and report regularly on it. The decision on the future steps on the EU path will continue to be in the hands of the EU member states, based on the progress of the respective countries following the revised methodology. In this changing geopolitical context, when we are tightening our regional partnerships and cooperation, our priority remains the Western Balkans. We are committed more than ever to bring the entire region within the European Union. It is more important now than ever to work on that, not only fast, but with full commitment and will by all the institutions. We continue our support to the Western Balkans and include them in our EU mechanisms to mitigate the current crises. We are integrating the region into our food security mechanism and including it as well as in our common gas procurement system. With our 30 billion euros economic and investment plan, we focus on strengthening the region's economy, reducing dependency on hydrocarbons for a sustainable future, building a digital economy for a cyber-secure future, and helping ensure there is a future for the youth of the region in the whole of the Western Balkans. Without proper regional cooperation, be it the Berlin process, be it the common regional market, or be it the Open Balkans initiative, the countries in the region simply cannot reap the benefits of the economic and investment plan. Anyone undermining or blocking regional cooperation based on EU rules and with EU participation undermines the economic and investment plan and the region moving forward as one. A lot of efforts have been invested in overcoming the remaining issues between Bulgaria and North Macedonia. We are nearly there. This is now the moment for all actors to take the final step. I have high hopes that the intergovernmental conferences with Albania and North Macedonia can be held within a matter of days. The countries have delivered all that has been asked. They're ready, and we should be too. We have now a solution on the table, endorsed by the Bulgarian parliament, so all obstacles are overcome. Europe must move forward. Last week, the European Council gave a positive signal regarding the possibility to give candidate status to Bosnia and Herzegovina. But this requires Bosnia and Herzegovina to deliver on a substantial set of reforms. We will assess the implementation of the 14 key priorities set out in our opinion in order to enable the European Council to revert and to decide.
Έτσι, όπως γνωρίζετε, είμαστε στο επαγγέλματα προκειμένου να υπάρξει πρόοδος. Και ήρθε πλέον η στιγμή. Η χώρα αυτή πρέπει να ανταποκριθεί με τρόπο απτό στο πρόγραμμα μεταρρυθμίσεων για να υπάρξει πρόοδος στην πορεία της προς την Ένωση, ευθυγραμμιζόμενη προς τις προσδοκίες του λαού αυτής της χώρας. Το κοσυφοπαίδιο περιμένει ακόμα την στιγμή που θα έρθει η απελευθέρωση του συστήματος Βίζα. Είναι ένα θέμα που μας εμποδίζει να προχωρήσουμε και να είμαστε ξεκάθαροι ότι υπάρχουν κάποιοι τομείς όπως η καταπολέμηση του οργανωμένου εγκλήματος και η καταπολέμηση του λαθρεμπορίου καθώς και διάφορα άλλα ζητήματα όπου τα κράτη-μέλη περιμένουν να δουν απτά αποτελέσματα. Είμαστε έτοιμοι να βοηθήσουμε το κοσυφοπαίδιο με τρόπο ανάλογο όπως το κάναμε και στην περίπτωση της Αλβανίας. Είμαστε έτοιμοι να δημιουργήσουμε ένα χάρτη πλεύσης όπου θα ανταποκριθούμε σε όλες αυτές τις ανησυχίες.
Need to get involved on the ground to help Kosovo. From our side, we are ready to give all the necessary financial, technical and political support to this process. Regarding the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, we need Kosovo to be giving us clear commitments and delivery. Turning to Serbia, we see that Serbia is in a very difficult situation under the current geopolitical circumstances and challenges. We need to recognize that. The issue of sanctions is only the symptom of the problem. This is why we are fully ready to support Serbia in aligning itself even further with the EU's policy on the war of Russia in Ukraine. But this should lead us to clear new commitments from Serbia as well. Needless to say, we need delivery also from Belgrade in the dialogue. Montenegro has gone through a period of democratic transition, but the country is on a good track. We expect the new government to restore the political and institutional trust, to maintain the cross-party dialogue, and to pave the way to move forward swiftly on the key pending EU reforms. The next milestone for Montenegro is meeting the interim benchmarks for the rule of law chapters 23 and 24. Before this, no chapters will be closed. Finally, with regard to Turkey, accession negotiations for EU membership have been effectively at a standstill since 2018. The Turkish government has reaffirmed the strategic goal of EU membership on numerous occasions. However, regrettably, our concerns about the fundamentals of the accession process remain unaddressed. The Commission continues intensifying engagement with Turkey in the areas of joint interest and in line with the guidance of the European Council. To conclude, the unity the EU has shown until now has been our biggest asset. We are stronger together. The historic decisions taken last week provides a clear vision. It is now the responsibility of all of us to turn this vision into reality. There is a lot of work ahead. We are all aware of that, and we need to go together on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you for your valuable insights, and I guess this was a good kick-off for our today's discussion. Colleagues, I have received in total 36 requests to speak from national parliaments, and we need to add the requests of speakers here from the European Parliament. This is a unique opportunity to exchange the views, not only with the EU member states parliaments, but also with colleagues from countries aspiring EU membership, both in the Western Balkans and the Eastern neighbourhood. So in order to accommodate all the requests for the floor and to ensure an equal treatment of all colleagues, I will have to be strict with the speaking time, which is up to 1 minute and 30 seconds per speaker. And once again, I will have to be strict, and 1 minute and 30 seconds is not 2 minutes and 30 seconds, it's 1 minute and 30 seconds, and a remote meeting makes it difficult for the chair at a certain stage to simply have to turn off the microphone for the connected colleague. But don't blame the chair, I'm only executing our joint rules to make this possible. So let's try and make it work, and I once again really ask for your collegial cooperation. The first speaker is from a national parliament. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Alexander Mereshko from the Verkhovna Rada. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be really quick. You know what's going on the ground, that Ukraine is currently outgunned and outnumbered by Russia. And the war Russia is waging against Ukraine is not only a war against Ukraine as such, it's a war against Europe. Russia is trying to punish us for wanting to become part of European family, to be free, not to be slaves of Russia, but to be part of Europe. And we deserve it because we've been waging war with Russia since 2014. And it took us 2 revolutions and 1 long war to become a member of the European Union. I believe that Ukraine is an asset. It has a huge potential for the European Union. It shouldn't be treated as a burden or as a problem. And I also believe that there should be a sort of a new deal or honest deal between Ukraine and the EU. Ukraine will be doing everything it can under very difficult circumstances of war, but everything we can to join EU. But we need help from the European Union and the countries to support us, because I believe that Ukraine deserves to become the EU member as soon as possible. I think it can happen within nearest years. And Ukraine should become an all-European project, because we're a country which will be ruined by Russia, which is in war. But Russia, we shouldn't succumb to Putin. We should do everything we can to destroy his plans and to admit EU to the European Union as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That was a bit over 1.5 minutes. That was a good beginning. I understand that Mr. Gomez Reino from the Spanish Parliament, Ms. Ariana Musilio Shoshi from the Kosovo Assembly, and Ms. Laima Andrikina from the Seimas in Lithuania are not connected. So the next on my list would then be Ms. Rosalia Ibolia Biro from the Chamber of Deputies from Romania.
Hello, everybody. I hope that you hear me.
We hear you, but we can't see you, Ms. Biro.
You can see me.
No, we can't see you.
I will try to manage it if it's possible.
Ms. Biro, try and connect again with the camera. In the meantime, I'll give the floor now to Mr. Titos Kolaczyan from the Romanian Senate.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Hello.
No.
No. Yes. Hello. Thank you so much, David. Colleagues, I hope we can hear each other and see each other. Thank you very much for this timely Inter-Parliamentary Committee meeting. This is the right moment after, indeed, a historical decision taken by the European Council while granting the status of candidate for Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova. If you remember, in February, just a few days after the Russian aggression against Ukraine just started on 24th of February, we had a meeting in Paris between the chairs of the Foreign Affairs and the Defense committees of the member states, of course, with our European institutional partners. I was among those who asked at that time to grant as soon as possible this clear European perspective. Now there is a clear decision. It's the right decision. Partially, I'm slightly disappointed about the decision taken as concern Georgia. But this is it. I hope that before the end of the year, this status of candidate will be granted also to Georgia. One small friendly advice to our Georgian friends. I think they should use also the other channel, the Council of Europe and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe monitoring, to advance in the next months with clear requirements related to their obligation upon accession to the Council of Europe. That will be extremely useful, in my opinion, also for the fulfilling the political criteria to obtain the status of candidate. My final comment, if it's possible, related to the Balkans. In Paris, under the French presidency, I also mentioned the fact that we need to advance faster also with the process related to the Balkans and Turkey. Unfortunately, somehow we are still taken prisoners by a bilateral dispute among one member state and one candidate country. Also, this has a negative impact on another candidate country, which is Albania. My only hope and political support is nevertheless to try to find a compromise solution that will allow the advancement faster with the European process also for the Balkans. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was way beyond 2 minutes, but we're still at the beginning trying to practice. Michael Gahler for the first MEP.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, Commissioner Vahey for illustrating where we stand now. Of course, we all welcome the decision that has been taken. Now, as I am the standing rapporteur on Ukraine, my question is, of course, on this country. The assessment from the Commission that had been taken was dated for the 31st of December 21, of course, before the war started. So fair enough, that was the point of reference. Now, when we assess how to proceed and how to advance with Ukraine, it requires now, in the light of the destruction that Russia has caused to the country and the overall situation, the assessment that you will be doing, hopefully by the end of the year. I hear noises that it might take even longer, has of course to consider the reality on the ground. So my question is, how would we, together with the Ukrainians, assess what the most urgent needs are? They may all be moving targets because we do not know how long the war will go and in which direction it will go. So which are your thoughts in this regard, how to now thoroughly assess where we stand with regard to Ukraine? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Biro. We're going to give her a second try. I'm calling Bucharest.
She's not connected.
So, Ms. Biro, I'm informed that you're not connected. Then I move on to the next speaker, and that would be Ms. Maka Bochurishvili from the Georgian Parliament.
Thank you. I thank the European Parliament AFET Committee for inviting us to this interparliamentary meeting today. It has been a decade that Russia's aggressive policy in our region does not let us to escape war and destruction. Georgia is the country that repeatedly experienced Russian aggression a number of times and continues to fight against occupation and its painful consequences even today. Unfortunately, after full-scale invasion of Ukraine, has the world realized the real face of Russia. We are being punished only because we dare to think about our freedom and sovereignty. On 23rd of June, the European Council made a historic decision on opening the EU membership perspective to Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. This is an important achievement for associated partners. Today, we mark the 8th anniversary of signing the association agreement, and we have been always serious about implementation of this agreement, knowing that only reforms and legal approximation with the EU acquis will transform the country and make it compatible with the European Union. The progress we have made during these 8 years is tangible and undeniable. Georgia, unlike Ukraine and Moldova, is not yet a candidate country, but it is crucial that we are now part of the EU enlargement policy. We will continue the effective implementation of reforms that will advance Georgia on the path of European integration and bring us closer to our ultimate goal. It is disappointing that the European Parliament's recent assessment on Georgia was largely based on the misinterpreted facts and in some cases was utterly unfounded. We are currently living in a very complex geopolitical environment, and making such mistakes only increases the vulnerability and does not help us to directly address these threats. We expect that the European Parliament will better analyze and carefully assess the situation in Georgia, and the European Union, with this further decision, will help us to unite the nation around the common European goals, and this is the will of 80% of Georgia's population. Thank you.
Thank you, colleague. Next is Mr. Ioannis Bournos from the Hellenic Parliament.
Dear colleagues, I congratulate Ukraine and Moldova, and I hope Georgia will be next. We all understand that the Russian aggression on Ukraine has changed everything. Most of us seem to agree on enlargement and strategic autonomy of the EU, of the urgent need to get serious about Europe's geopolitical standing and the need to closely coordinate and upgrade our diplomatic efficacy and defensive capabilities. We have realized how much we need a Europe that is an energetic and influential force for peace and stability around its neighbourhood, that is able to deter aggression in the continent and share responsibility when dealing with crises at its borders. On the other hand, our inability to unblock the candidacy path of Western Balkans, especially North Macedonia and Albania, is not just a simple failure, it undermines our unity and status. Instead of reinforcing ourselves, we leave the door open to intervention by other powers to seed division, to use one member state against another, to block the EU's common foreign policy and manipulate it to serve their interests. The enlargement and integration of the Western Balkans is a step towards peace, stability and growth, especially for the Balkan region and all current member states. So let us all rise up to the occasion and assume our responsibilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. MEP Picula is next.
Hvala predsjedniče. Poštovani parlamentarci iz cijele Europe.
Thank you. All distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the present candidates and future candidates. The enlargement is again the focus after the Russian aggression, after it has been set aside for a long time. There are several reasons for that. Because of the reduced absorption capacity of the EU due to a serious internal and external crisis, and also because the lack of good reasons for future enlargement. No matter what the explanation is, we can now conclude that the enlargement policy is one of the most successful policies of the EU since its beginning, because this is the development of democratic values and greater security on the continent, the latter being the biggest threat right now. The support of Ukraine and to Moldova from the Council is a very good signal, and the perspective for Georgia is equally important. At the same time, last week, decisions were the beginning of a new apathy in the Western Balkans because of the decision about the Bosnian opening with the accession talks with Albania and North Macedonia, and visa regimes shows that the EU can become a credible political player, and this would also be supported by the end of the discussions with Montenegro.
The next two speakers from the national parliaments are Zsolt Nemet from the Hungarian National Assembly. Zsolt.
Hello, dear colleagues. Dear David, my first question is related to you. We are very glad to be at an Inter-Parliamentary committee with you again, but we feel bad that we are not able to shake your hand. We would love it, David. Do you still intend to invite us to Strasbourg or Brussels in the near foreseeable future? This is my first question. The second one is relating the enlargement and the neighbourhood policy. Mr. Commissioner, enlargement and neighbourhood policies have been treated separately until now. It seems now that the policies and the instruments have to be integrated also in the near foreseeable future. What do you think about this? And my third question relates to Georgia. If the Ukrainian and the Moldovan decision was a geopolitical decision, as it was said by you, Mr. Commissioner, I think it was a really important mistake or a missed opportunity that we have not treated in the same way Georgia, because Georgia was the first country who was the victim of the Russian aggression in 2008. And as Mrs. Maka Borachishvili said, it is in Georgia, it had a very, very negative reception, and understandably so. So I would like to ask you, Mr. Commissioner, that why this differentiation has taken place. Is it true that some people suggest that the geographical position of Georgia is too bad? Did it play any role in this development? And when do you plan to replace this decision with a more positive one? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zsolt, for your comment, and also as regards your question. Believe me, Zsolt, I sincerely hope that for our next Inter-Parliamentary Committee meeting in autumn, we will be able to finally welcome you all again in Brussels. You can imagine it's much more fun to chair a meeting in physical presence than with colleagues who are sometimes connected remotely, sometimes not. So once again, Zsolt, I can't wait to see and greet you personally after the summer break at our next meeting in autumn, and I will make sure that COVID will not take place in Europe while we're having this IPC meeting. Next on my list is now, where's the list? I need it. Gary Capelli from Croatia, please.
Poštovani kolega McAllister.
Dear colleague McAllister,
Commissioner Vehoi, dear colleagues, thank you for the organization of the meeting today. Last week, Ukraine and Moldova were granted candidacy status. We welcome that. Croatia, in its work through the EU institution, has been continuously advocating. We know that it was in particular the existing of the Prime Minister of Croatia and the government that advocated that. We believe that Georgia will soon achieve the same result. In these very challenging times for EU, the enlargement policy had to adapt to certain circumstances. However, I want to emphasize how important it is to keep in focus also the countries of what is called Western Balkans, in particular within the security mechanism, which we mentioned so much at the beginning of this conference today. The lack of European perspective in these countries, which have held candidate status for some 17 years, that would mean that some other perspectives will prevail in this, if you allow me to call it, in this inner courtyard of EU. I believe that we as member states don't have an interest in such matter happening. So I welcome the lifting of veto regarding North Macedonia. I hope that they, as well as Albania, will soon start negotiating. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Capelli. And colleagues, to make things even more complicated, I've been informed that the clock taking the time of speakers is no longer functioning. So we're going to have to do this with our own stopwatch. Next is MEP David Guetta, please. Mr. Guetta?
Oui, juste un rappel.
Yes, I would just like to give a reminder to member states, to those countries with the statute of candidates and countries aspiring to have that status. The European Union today can no longer consider any enlargement without undertaking a profound reform of its institutions and even a reinvention of its institutions, I would say. Today, the emergency is to open up the discussion between member states and countries aspiring to becoming candidates. It's not about making wishes, about accelerating the accession process. Please remind the tough, I'm sorry I have to remind you of this tough reality, but I had to. Thank you.
Thank you, David Guetta. Sorry. See, I was with my teenage daughters all weekend, and your nephew is even more famous than you are, at least among German teenagers. Mark de Mesmaker is the next speaker from the Belgian Senate. Excuse me. Mark. Mark.
Sorry, I was lost in translation. Goedemiddag, collega's.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I would like to say two things. The title of our meeting refers to the aftermath of Russia's aggression. So the aftermath, but the problem is that we're not yet in the aftermath. The war is still ongoing and has been since 2014. So we need to, as the European Union, Putin believes that our unity isn't going to continue. We are a democracy. Putin doesn't have any electoral issues to worry about, but we do, and we need to make sure that we can sustain this in a longer term. That's what worries me. So it's very important for our Ukrainian friends to be able to end this conflict quickly. If we can give them the opportunity to end the war quickly, we need to provide to them what they need and also to not give them conflicting signals. We are being told by some member states that we mustn't humiliate Putin. Another point is that membership of the Union goes back to the starting point of our European Union, which is the ability of all European citizens to live in free democratic states. Regarding Ukraine, you need to look at the journey that they have already made in the context of the association treaty. At the same time, this will take some time because we mustn't compromise the implementation of the Copenhagen Agreement, and so the timing and the speed of implementation is going to depend on our partners as well. We are aware of what Putin's foreign policy is, how he sees Europe, how he sees the integration of Western Balkan countries, which he will certainly try to go against. So I hope we have learnt some lessons from this.
Is Mr. Nikola Lavrinovic from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Lavrinovic. Now, go ahead.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you. The Russian invasion into Ukraine has placed at the centre of the debate the enlargement of the Union's borders. Portuguese Parliament has had the opportunity some days before the European Council to support overwhelmingly the candidate status to Ukraine. It's a truly historic moment for the future of the Union. A moment which will find a new order based upon a political commitment, but also on a security commitment. Defence has become a predominant issue in this new geostrategic scenario, but we should always keep on defend democracy and human rights, which are the fundamental rights of the EU. Rights that each one of the potential members of the EU will have to show that it complies with so as to be a member of our family. We should be at the front line to defend the granting of the candidate status to these countries. It also lies to call to attention to some caution for the implementation of the Copenhagen Criteria, which will ensure the credibility and the continuity of these accession countries. We will certainly willing to provide all support in the Ukraine so as to wish that it will soon restore its tranquility. And this is our fervent wish from Portugal, so that it can fully comply with the requirements to be part of this big European family. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Weitz from the European Parliament, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, first of all, thanks to all the colleagues to participate on this meeting today. Very important to hear your voices. On Ukraine and Moldova, we have to be aware that granting candidate status is done out of solidarity, out of support for your struggles, out of respect of how you are defending your country, your values and our values. It's not based on a merit-based process as we're having it on the Balkans, but I still stand straight to back this decision. I'm happy that we took it. When it comes to Balkans, what the effect of this decision, while not really proceeding with the Balkan area, Western Balkan area, is that we are losing even more credibility than we have lost already in the Balkans. And especially when it comes to Bosnia, well, I have understanding that we may wait until the elections to grant Bosnia candidate status, but the same arguments as for Moldova and as for Ukraine may also count for Bosnia. We're having with Republika Srpska and Mr. Dodik, a leadership that is in close alliance with Mr. Lavrov and Mr. Putin, which is co-financed and financing partly its statehood or semi-statehood with Russian money, and which is clearly in contact and involved into a Russian strategy. And I do really not think that we should wait until the first bullet flies, until we take the needed decisions, to also realize that this has a geostrategical dimension as well. And it's the very same geostrategical dimension as we have with Moldova and Russia. And last but not least, a call to our very own member states. Please, to all the non-accepting and non-recognizing countries to Kosovo, please reconsider your position. We urgently need your consent also to move on with something like visa liberalization on Kosovo. We got to do our homeworks within the European Union before, or let's say at the same time, as we demand progress from candidate status countries.
Thank you. The next two speakers from the national parliaments, I will give the floor first to Mr. Piero Fassino from the Italian Chamber of Deputies.
Grazie. Grazie, President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for this very appropriate meeting moment. We're all glad that the European Council has granted the Ukraine, the Moldavia, the candidate status in perspective to Georgia, and I congratulate with colleague Maresco and I salute him. I'd like to concentrate on the Balkans, though. In fact, the Balkan issue is becoming extremely urgent. 27 years have elapsed since the Dayton agreements and 19 years from the Thessaloniki Council. And so this is a very long amount of time. And the result of such a time lapse being so long is that frustration in the public opinion in the Balkans has grown. The invasiveness of China, Russia, Turkey, Emirates in the Balkans has grown, and the Balkan countries that should carry out the reforms as the European Union slowed down, they also slowed down in parallel. We haven't obtained any positive result, waiting 20 years to let the Balkans join the EU. So what I say is that it's time to change these things. An ambassador from the Balkan area a few days ago told me, should we wait for Russia to invade us before the European Union considers us members of the family? Now, I believe that these words have got to sound as an alarm bell. So it's time we speed up. And the European Parliament concluded in a document saying accelerating the negotiations. Well, this acceleration has got to be concrete. It can't just be a statement and nothing more. As for Macedonia, the proposal of the French presidency is that the commitment of Macedonia to modify their constitution is an important element to open up the negotiations. But the French proposal does not imply that until the constitution is amended, negotiations with Macedonia cannot be opened. So let's not do any mistakes. We have to be timely, give a sign of timeliness and effective political integration of the Balkans. We have no more time.
Next is Pavel Fischer from the Czech Senate.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Very happy to take part in this important debate at this very moment. I will have one question to our friends from Western Balkans who are online or who are participating here today. Because among the conclusions of this European Council, we read under the number 15 that in the conclusions, European Council calls for acceleration of the accession process. And my colleague from Italy spoke about already. My question mark is, how do you in Western Balkans imagine that this acceleration should be realized? And now my second point and final one is that I would like to react to the first introductory remarks by Oliver Farhel, the Commissioner on Neighbourhood and Enlargement, a member of the Commission which declared to be geopolitical. Commissioner, you have our full support because you, I try to quote, you said, Commission will help to align with EU policy on the war with Russia and you spoke about Serbia. I think that the relationship of EU with Russia and China is very conflictual, and we will help Serbia to deliver also on this, but the choice is theirs. And we have to alert that buying weaponry from Russia or China might be extremely dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel Fischer. Ms. Bonfrisco is next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Grazie, Presidente. Ben trovato al Commissario Barrey e benvenuti a tutti I colleghi dei...
Commissioner Barrey and all the colleagues from the national parliaments who are here today to celebrate the unity of the European Union in spite of all the diversities we represent. Now, it is our desire to stay united and to stand by Ukraine in this dramatic moment of invasion from Russia and stay and flank them, continuing to provide military, economic, and any other type of resource for the end to be halted, to be stopped as soon as possible. The Commissioner has underlined that the Balkans are looking ahead, looking for new opportunities to cooperate and to develop further contacts and relationship within a well-deserved European and Atlantic perspective. Now, as an example, I would like to refer to Albania. Since January the 1st, it is part of the Security Council of the United Nations and therefore can make decisions on the most outstanding issues worldwide, be it conflicts, their consequences on famine, energy, the nuclear threat, terrorism, and so on. So at this point, I would like to mention the words of the Albanian ambassador Ferit Hoxha at the United Nations Palace on the Western Balkans, that he exalts as a rapidly developing country, a region that does not forget its own history but is not hostage to its past. So the deliberate acceleration by the European Council is therefore a moral obligation for us, and Europe cannot waste time. Thank you.
Dear Ms. Bonfrisco, I have good news. Apparently the clock is back. So please keep an eye on the 1.5 minute proposal. Next speaker on my list from the national parliaments is Mr. Haris Georgiadis from the House of Representatives in Cyprus.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, Ukraine's application at a time when it is waging a struggle for its freedom and independence against the brutal authoritarian regime, Putin's Russia, and the granting of a candidate status represents a triumph for European integration. And the cases of Moldova and Georgia carry an equally significant symbolism. It is such countries which demonstrate a real commitment to European liberal democracy, to European values and principles, which deserve the right to membership. And I would also like to encourage the other applicant states from the Western Balkans to maintain their commitment and effort. On the other hand, this cannot be said of countries which fail to respect international law, which violate human rights and which do not respect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of their neighbours, of EU member states. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Tomáš Valášek from the Slovak National Council.
Many thanks, David, and I apologize for the informal get-up, but it's unbelievably hot in Slovakia. Colleagues, it isn't obviously over, the war, but it's not too early to start drawing some early lessons. I mean, to me, the most important lesson is that we gain absolutely nothing as Europeans from denying countries that desire membership the right to apply and leaving them in a grey zone. This is not to say, obviously, that all of the countries that wish to join will also qualify in the end, but it does mean that those who wish to join, those that are in Europe and clearly live and die by our European ideals, should never be told no out of the fear of angering Russia, because that attitude gains us nothing. Vladimir Putin, I'm afraid, will do as he pleases. He is determined to restore the zone of influence that includes the former Soviet satellites, and he will try to pursue that goal, including through use of force, irrespective of what we do and say. We don't have the power to change his mind, but we do have the power to deny him success. And one of the most important ways is, of course, by binding countries and willing countries such as Ukraine close to the EU and eventually into the EU, not just the same street, but into the same house. We now have a mountain of evidence that accession works, not perfectly, but a vast majority of countries that have joined have become more prosperous, more democratic, and therefore more immune to Russian shenanigans. My last point, I listened carefully to Chancellor Scholz's warning that enlargements have increased the need for reform, and I agree, but I warn that that mustn't become an excuse for us not to advance Ukraine's and Moldova's memberships now that we have done the right thing and granted them a candidate status. The absence of reform, including in the way we make decisions, that's our problem, our challenge, not theirs. So let's get on with it. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Tomasz. Next is for the European Parliament, Kinga Gál.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy that the enlargement got a new impetus with the decision last week taken, and thanks to Commissioner Várhelyi to his clean commitment towards enlargement, what he expressed in his intervention at the beginning. I think it was a very important symbolic decision to give the candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova, and it will help the European perspective, these countries. But it is also very important to remain coherent in decision-taking and to keep our credibility. Therefore, I regret that Georgia, as well as Bosnia-Herzegovina, were not granted the same status this time. And I want to underline, as it was underlined several times today, but we have to press on this, that it is more important than ever to keep our credibility and reliability towards the Western Balkans. It is in the interest of us that the security of EU and the stability of EU is linked strongly to the security and stability of the Western Balkans. And we have to encourage these countries, because what we see and feel now is a disappointment and discouragement from their side. So therefore, I underline that we have to speed up negotiations and open up new chapters with Serbia and Montenegro, and open negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, give the candidate status to Bosnia-Herzegovina, and grant visa liberalization to Kosovo. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kinga. Next is Mr. Branimir Gvozdenovic from the Skupština in Montenegro.
Thank you. Good morning, distinguished members of the European Parliament and other parliamentarians. I would like to convey our best regards from Mr. Šaranović, and we believe that the situation in Ukraine has pointed to the importance of the membership of the Western Balkan countries in the EU, and the process should be accelerated. And we have foreign policy ambitions which have been set aside because of priorities related to internal consolidation. The message sent by MEPs is quite clear that Western Balkan countries should be a part of the EU. We are getting closer to the EU. The only alternative that is acceptable for Montenegro is full membership in the EU. Next week, we will devote a session, our parliamentary session, to the report of the EU and the European Parliament, and with your participation and Mr. Tony Pizzula, and we will have an opportunity to talk about the EU future of Montenegro. So we're looking forward to and asking you to join us online to talk with you and your associates and to see whether you are available. Montenegro is fully aligned with foreign and security policy of the EU. We are supporting the Ukraine, its territorial integrity and sovereignty, and I would like to welcome the decision of the EU to grant candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova. But at the same time, you should not put on hold countries of the Western Balkans. I would like to invite the EU and appeal to the EU to take this opportunity and use this situation to have Western Balkans to continue its path. Thank you very much, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Antonio Miloski from the Republic of North Macedonia. He's not connected. Then I can now give the floor to Ms. Biro from Romania, who I have been informed is now connected. Ms. Biro?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I am very... I will talk without camera. Unfortunately, the connection is not very good. So congratulations for Moldova and Ukraine and European perspective of Georgia. Romania has been and remains a consistent and active supporter of EU enlargement process. The Russian military aggression against Ukraine has once again highlighted that we need a strong EU political influence both at the level of its neighbors and on the global stage. We welcome the full alignment with the decision of the European Union in the field of the common foreign and security policy of many Western Balkan partners and reiterate our call on other partners in the region to move forward in this process. Our support is based not only on the belief that these countries belong to the greater European family, but also on the reality of the progress they have made in the reform process. Accession of the European Union is not a short-term goal, unfortunately, but the aspiring state must benefit from the optional framework for the reform process. Romania strongly supports the need for a visionary political gesture in line with the commitment of the aspirating states, and we support a clear engagement process. We need to encourage the Western Balkan states. We need a strong political will and an efficient strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Biro. Now I give the floor to Andrius Kubilius from the European Parliament.
Well, thanks a lot, Chair. Very briefly, definitely also congratulations to our friends in Ukraine and in Moldova for getting recent decisions. But also I would like to congratulate EU decision makers that for me it looks like that EU is coming back to understand that enlargement policy really is of a huge geopolitical significance. So I would not agree with those who are saying that candidate status given to Ukraine and Moldova is just a symbolic gesture. It's some kind of humanitarian aid. That this is not based on merit-based approach, not at all. I think that the difference which we see is coming from changes inside of EU mentality and understanding. And I hope that it will mean that the previous very popular slogan that there is lack of appetite for enlargement will be changed into a new slogan, hungry for enlargement. EU needs to have such an ambition how to expand the area of democracy, development and prosperity on the European continent. And I would suggest really to look into possibility to create from parliamentarians, something like Alliance for Enlargement, to mobilize permanently, to mobilize political will on the EU side for enlargement policy and also for needed EU institutional reforms, and also for mobilization of political will on applicant countries to go for reforms. That's our common agenda, and we need to mobilize ourselves in order to achieve the goals.
Thank you, Andreas. The next speaker is from Serbia, Ms. Elvira Kovac. Please.
Thank you, distinguished chair. Dear colleagues, on behalf of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia and its Committee for European Integration, I would like really to thank you for the invitation to this meeting. The EU accession process for membership represents the strategic commitment and a major foreign policy priority for the Republic of Serbia. And therefore, the country continues to reaffirm its commitment to the process of integration into the European Union, as well as to the acceptance of European values and principles. Before acceding to the EU, Serbia will continue to gradually align its foreign and security policy with the EU in order to have it fully aligned on the point of conclusion of negotiations. We regret most sincerely all the developments in Eastern Europe we are facing, and we see and feel the loss of every life of every man in Ukraine as a true tragedy. Guided by the principles on which its foreign policy is based, the Republic of Serbia considers the violation of the territorial integrity of any country, including Ukraine, to be wrong. And what is most important, I would like to point out that we are following very closely internal developments in the European Union. We are concerned about the same problems that member states are facing both economically and externally. And we hope that the European Union will successfully tackle the issues it is facing, that the enlargement policy will not be brought into question. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Elvira Kovac, for your statement. Next is Mr. Adrian Bautel, or Botel, from Moldova.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Commissioner, distinguished parliamentarians, and dear friends. First of all, thank you for the solidarity and support shown in the request of Moldova for the candidate status and European perspective. Alongside Ukraine and Georgia, in these times of war and crisis, all we want is to be part of the free world, and this candidate status is of utmost importance for us. European integration for the Republic of Moldova is the process of internal transformation and improving economy, ensuring better living conditions for the citizens of the Republic of Moldova in the first place. Already in the next weeks, the government will put together a plan on implementing Commission's recommendations and will adjust its institutional settings to improve the coordination of EU-related reforms and EU-related agenda. We look forward for a bigger or increased support from the EU and member states in accelerating implementation of the EU reforms. In the current situation, bigger support for the EU integration of Moldova means more resilience in the face of the crisis caused by Russian invasion of Ukraine. It means bigger capacity for Moldova to stay solidary with Ukraine and continue offering humanitarian support and support for the refugees that comes to the Republic of Moldova. And it means a bigger hope for the Moldovan citizens in a safer and more secure day of tomorrow. We really looking forward working even closer with all of you at the European Parliament, with the national parliaments, and of course, in these troubling times, our associated trio of Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine should stick together, should be solidary and strong. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the European Parliament, Nacho Sanchez Amor, please.
Gracias, David. La operación de ofrecimiento.
Thank you, David. The operation to offer the wish from the eastern countries to be part of the European Union is a political operation which geopolitical reasons have to do with the war. None of the countries fulfill the conditions, and unless there was a war, we wouldn't be talking about this. This is why we don't understand why we should have a differentiated treatment to Georgia. One thing is to give out a political signal, and something else is to send the questionnaire, which is already part of a formal proceeding. In that time, reason, what was geopolitical reasons for just one of the candidates or neighbors, Georgia, becomes a democratic conditionality process, and we don't really understand why. It is clear that we are not very happy with what's going on in Georgia in the past year, but if this is an operation with a geopolitical meaning, we cannot divide the trio with a different conditions for ones or for the different countries. If, as the Commission and the Council said, we are very concerned for the political division in the country, my fear is that whatever the reasons that we have to give a different treatment for Georgia, those reasons will not be the same that we'll be having in the domestic policy in Georgia, and this will deepen the polarization we are now criticizing. This is why we need to solve this as soon as possible and place Georgia at the same status as Ukraine and Moldova as soon as possible, and then we'll start negotiations, and then we will apply to Georgia our critics to what the parliament is doing in the last year. But dividing the three countries right now is a political mistake with grave consequences for Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Nacho. Next is Ms. Ventislava Lyubinova from the Bulgarian National Assembly. I've been informed that you have camera problems. If you speak without camera, it's English only and it would not be interpreted. Please.
Hello. Hello. Bulgaria has always been one of the strongest supporters of enlargement, even when the process was not so popular. For my country, enlargement is the best opportunity that together augment and consolidate the space of freedom, democracy, peace, good neighborliness and prosperity of the European continent. This cause is even more important today because of Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine. I welcome the decision of the European Council to grant status to Ukraine and Moldova. I am sure that we will all continue to work to make this happen, for Georgia as well, which is also my personal cause. I would like to say a few words about the Western Balkans, where the geopolitical situation it is still different from our Eastern partners. I deeply believe that each country, without exception, each of the 6 countries must move more decisively towards the European Union, each with its own characteristics and achievements. Also, alignment with the common foreign and security policy is a key indicator of the level of perception and respect for European values. It is time to thank the French presidency, the Commission, and the Member States for their efforts to make the Republic of Northern Macedonia closer to the start of negotiation. I realized that this process was not easy. It's not easy at all, especially for my country. I believe that now it's the time for courage and strong political will on the part of the Northern Macedonia for bold decision. For bold decision that will take the way our closest neighbor to move forward to our common future within the European Union. Courage, dear friends, we will be with you all the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is for the European Parliament, Dragos Tudorache.
Thank you, David. I'll move straight to questions. Commissioner Verily, I'll read some of the conditions that both Ukraine and Moldova have to fulfill until the end of the year for the next round of assessment on the Commission side. Fight corruption, increase capacity, complete reform, de-oligarchization by eliminating excessive influence. My question is, clearly there will need to be some sort of a translation into more concrete deliverables, more tangible and measurable. So how will you work with the two countries now to translate, again, these conditions into a concrete plan, and what is the calendar for that? Second question, according to the new methodology, the member states are due to have a more increased inclusive role in the assessment. How will that happen? How will you involve the member states more in working with Ukraine and Moldova on their path that they're just starting? Thank you.
Thank you, Dragos. I am now calling the Portuguese Assembly, Mr. Jorge Seguro Sanchez.
Chair of the committee, Commissioner, dear participants of the European Parliament and national parliaments, a special word of greetings to our guests. Welcome. First of all, I'd like to express the position that the EU should have in this matter, a position of the Union, clear and transparent, which do not add any difficulties to the dramatic situation in Ukraine. The strength of the EU has been precisely its joint action in this war to defend democratic values. In this framework, I'd like to congratulate the Commission for the proposal and the recent decision to advance decisively in accepting the memberships of Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia. But the granting of these status should not be done with any mental reservation, neither to generate expectations or frustrations, and the EU has to assume simultaneously that it needs to reflect upon its institutional architecture, and at the same time strengthen the need to ensure a very clear commitment of continuity of the financial and humanitarian support to Ukraine towards its needed recovery. We've deemed very important the current situation in Ukraine should strengthen the needs to reflect on other common policies in the EU, such as energy policies and energy supply policies promoting renewable energies. With defend consensus and we defend an urgent action in the compliance of these member countries to the conditions for accession. Thank you.
From the National Council of Slovakia.
Dear Chairman, dear friends, of course it's a pleasure that our neighbor Ukraine received a status of candidate. On the other side, the country is bleeding. And we have in European Union a rule that we can accept only a country without any border disputes. And in this case, we, in fact, if we think about it really, leave Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine in fate in hands of KGB criminal from Kremlin, because all these three countries have border disputes, and if we stick to this rule, all the invitations, all the nice gestures are less worth. By the way, I would use my time to appeal on all colleagues parliamentarians. They should press to the governments that it's nice to participate in a meeting and give invitation, but Ukraine needs weapons, weapons and weapons, because only victorious Ukraine can be member of EU, and that's why it's our duty not only to invite, but also to do the most actual and most positive thing we can do for them. By the way, we should avoid any fifth column, any agent of Putin in European Union. And it is also the case of Western Balkan. There is no interest in country that look to Kremlin as a other choose. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker here in the European Parliament is Mr. Titos.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, κύριε Πρόεδρε. Συμφωνώ.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to salute the decision of the Commissioner in charge of the enlargement, who said that historic moments call for historic decisions. But may I add to that historic decisions, namely in favor of enlargement and the inclusion of Ukraine and Moldova and later Georgia, also impose efforts of historic dimensions. This is why I believe that both at the military level and when it comes to financial aid, we're not helping Ukraine as much as we should. Moreover, I would like to ask the Commissioner how he thinks of approaching the Ukrainian issue, because the normal process for enlargement, I do not believe, could be implemented, since it is easy to foresee that in the years to come, Russia will be occupying a considerable part of Ukrainian territory, and there will be a kind of war situation. So I fully agree with my colleague from Ukraine as to the fact of the issue being not just the aggression by Russia against Ukraine, it's an aggression against Europe and the European security system, which is why I believe that Serbia and Turkey need to be keeping a greater distance from Putin and his policies. This is the time for them to prove to us that they are in favor of their European perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Alessandro Gigliovigna.
Dear colleagues, good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I would like to express my solidarity to the Ukrainian people. Granting candidate status to Ukraine is an important political gesture. We know that the time will be quite long, and let's underline it. As for the moment being, it is a political gesture.
At the time being, this is a political act and a very important one. In the Balkans, we have to speed up, and very briefly, I believe we have to avoid that those countries look eastward due to the uncertainties of the European Union. And we know that looking eastwards means also in economical respect, but also with respect to Russia and China. Now, the European Union should be a partner fostering dialogue in this very difficult moment. I feel sorry thinking that the European Union has been overtaken as an institutional element that has been even surpassed by Turkey and by Erdogan. I believe that it is up to us, it is up to the European Union to place itself at the center of history and resume once again its role as an element or as something as an element that can lead the way towards peace and therefore make it possible for Europe to take on its role in the world.
Next is Ms. Doina German from the Republic of Moldova.
Hello, do you hear me?
Ms. German, we can hear you, but it would be even nice if we could see you. Would you like to turn your camera on?
Yeah, sure. 1 second.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair McAllister. Dear colleagues, dear friends, Moldova is a small country that just became a few days ago a country with great hope and reach of a European future. And this historic decision to grant Moldova and Ukraine the EU candidate status is a crucial turn for our people. that for sure will bring more democracy, stability, security and peace for us, but for the whole European community as well. The European Parliament demonstrated that it has a strong voice and political will, advocating for Moldova as a country that can bring value to the enlargement process. And I believe that we can grow into a resilient, democratic and prosperous country. We will definitely remain a responsible and committed partner and work with even more dedication to pursue this European country project, the project that should and will join the efforts of our entire society, I mean the authorities, the civil society, business community, and of course our huge and great Moldovan diaspora. We will complete the essential steps of our justice reform, fight against corruption, the protection of human rights, the equality and safety of all our citizens. And I strongly believe that our future, the future of the Republic of Moldova, is in the European Union. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Ms. German. Next is Mr. Kolaczyan Brenner from Hungary.
Herzlichen Dank für das Wort, Herr Präsident McAllister. Wie meine Kollegen mir sagen, kann man mein Bild nicht sehen.
Herr Kollege, man kann in der Tat Ihr Bild nicht sehen. Sie können gerne sprechen, es wird aber nicht übersetzt. So sehr ich mich freuen würde, wenn Sie jetzt Deutsch sprechen. Das Problem ist, dass die allerwenigsten Kollegen wahrscheinlich Deutsch verstehen. Deshalb entweder Kamera an oder ich würde Ihnen empfehlen, Englisch zu sprechen. Oder Sie versuchen es auf Deutsch, aber dann werden es die meisten nicht verstehen. Jetzt ist die Kamera an.
Jetzt ist das Bild da, wenn ich das richtig.
Now we have the image. Now you can see me. Is that right? Yes. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to continue in my German native language. Dear colleagues, in this new historical epoch following the aggression war of Putin's Russia against Ukraine, it is very important that the European Union would send very clear signals, and that is why I very much welcome the decision of the European Union with respect to Ukraine and Moldova, but I would also like to see the same signal as well in the case of Bosnia-Herzegovina, as also with Georgia. Many Sunday speeches of goodwill, we pledge that the European Union is a community of values, and that is why it's important to send unequivocal signals in Western Balkan in terms which work against the influence of countries like Russia and China, and to convince them, those countries that is very important on the European continent to secure prosperity and freedom and the European fundamental rights. And as a last thought, as a member of the German minority in Hungary, I would also like to emphasize the rights of minority under the Copenhagen Criteria. Our linguistic and cultural diversity should also be safeguarded and protected in the new member states. Thank you very much.
Beitrag. Next speaker is
very much.
Giulekas from the Hellenic Parliament.
Καλησπέρα από την Αθήνα.
Hello from Athens. I would like to salute my friend Chair McAllister, the friend Chair Fassino, and all the colleagues. We meet amidst a war within Europe, which renders even more timely the message of the visionaries and the founding fathers of the EU for a political unification of Europe, but also it makes urgent the need not to allow to any revisionist power to put in doubt the different treaties and the borders, causing different problems in other territories and causing turmoil. Now, when it comes to the enlargement process, For these three countries, Greece for sure supports a very close partnership according to the different accession agreements signed under the Hellenic presidency in 2014, but we must also focus on two things. First, this enlargement depends on the efforts made by each country separately. And second, we must also highlight that along with this enlargement, we must pay attention to the other countries which, for the last time period, have negotiating procedures with the EU. I'm talking about Western Balkans, where there we must all focus on in order to be able to assist everybody, accelerate when it comes to the European integration. Let us all complete the vision for a big, united European family. Thank you so much for your attention and wish you all the best from Athens. Thank you.
Thank you, Efyaristo. Mr. Haki Abazi from the Kosovo Assembly is next. Mr. Abazi is not connected. Then I give the floor to Mr. Nikolaos Zamcharadze from Georgia.
Hello. It is with mixed feelings that I'm addressing you today. On the one hand, we are very happy that the European Council took a decision on giving membership perspective to Georgia, Ukraine and Moldova that we could not even have dreamt of 6 months ago. On the other hand, we are disappointed by differentiating between the associated trio, and it is especially disappointing that the conditions that are set for the three countries are mostly the same conditions at almost 90%. This is even more lacks logical explanation why Georgia has to implement the conditions first and then get status, whereas Ukraine and Moldova got the status with the conditions. We hope that the explanation given by President Macron that it's all about geostrategic location will not hold true, because otherwise then it means that the doors for Georgia are shut. On the other hand, I would like to also stress that the conditions that we need to implement, some of them are very concrete and we welcome that and we will of course implement them, but some of them are vague and cannot be really measured, so we would like to have more clarity on those conditions that might be read differently, and this is something that we need to work together with you in order to advance Georgia's membership path and in 6 months to reconsider this decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleague. If I'm informed correctly, we are facing the last 4 speakers, all from the national parliaments. I now would like to give the floor to Mr. Marios Matijožaitis from Lithuania. So he's not connected. Then I'm calling Mr. Anastasios Chatzivasiliou from the Greek Parliament. Is our Greek friend connected? If that is not the case, I am calling Ms. Stefania Craxi from the Italian Parliament.
Quindi, sala vuota.
Formed is now connected. Mr. Haki Abazi, we'll give it a second try. Mr. Abazi, we hear you, and now we would like to... No, we see you, and now we would like to hear you. No, we can't hear you. Microphone, unmute, mute. I'm sorry, we can't hear you, but we can see you. Now, whatever you did, that was good. Please, go ahead. Please. No. Say something. Go ahead, Kosovo.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair, and I'm sorry about that. Just to reiterate some of the speakers, we're very happy about Ukraine and Moldova. There is no more critical historical time to move swiftly with great leadership from the EU. We want the same for Georgia, obviously coming from Western Balkans. That needs to be moving ahead. So I fully agree with Chair Fassino and MP Waits. And to the answer to the question of Mr. Powell Fisher, yes, we need to be bold and call for alignment of the foreign policies and defense and security policies for all the members and aspiring members. Kosovo is ready, has put the sanction, has passed the resolution in support of Ukraine, is ready to move forward, and we fully believe not only on the right of the visa liberalization, but also on the membership of the Council of Europe as well. So my question, a critical question, is to Mr. Varhelyi. What kind of roadmap we're talking when European Commission in 2018 has confirmed that Kosovo has fulfilled all the criteria, double of other countries who have entered the visa liberalization process. So please, let's review fundamentally the position of the leadership and move in a bold ways in order to close all the gaps for third actors in the European continent. And Kosovo government and Kosovo institutions are absolutely ready to meet and work pragmatically, as in the case of the energy agreement with Serbia, but also on other aspects in order to close any type of vulnerability for the European continent that is coming as a threat of the third actors, and especially from Russia and its proxies in the continent.
Thank you. I'm asking the Secretariat, is anybody else from the national parliaments connected?
Within 3 minutes.
No. Look, we're at the end of our speaking list and we can't wait for further colleagues to go back. I would now conclude today's speakers list and would like to call DG NIA. Commissioner Varhelyi and later on Maciej Popowski have been listening carefully to all the comments made by our colleagues from the National Parliament and the European Parliament. And Maciej Popowski, it's up to you now to try and answer as many questions as possible and also on the many comments you've heard. So I'll give the floor to you. We are quite good in time. If you can try and sum it up in 15 minutes, that would be very helpful. Maciej. Maciej, we can see you, but we can't hear you.
Once again, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can, thanks.
I'm sorry. Right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, dear David. It's quite a task to react to all the points raised, but I'll do my best. Indeed, just to recall the initial comment of Commissioner Varhelyi, the decisions taken first by the Commission and then by the European Council are truly historic. There is absolutely no exaggeration in that. And if we look in hindsight how far we have come, it's actually quite amazing. Of course, focus is rightly on the candidate status granted to Ukraine and Moldova, and one that is possible for Georgia. But in fact, all the three countries have the European perspective confirmed for the first time ever, something which was quite difficult to imagine a few months ago. We all remember that the countries in the Western Balkans were granted the European perspective at the Thessaloniki summit in June 2003, so it's quite a while ago, and now it happened with regard to the three applicants from the East. We have done everything by the book. I just want to reassure all participants. So we applied the enlargement methodology as revised in 2020 to the three applicant countries without any shortcuts. We did things very quickly, and so did they. They replied to the membership questionnaires in record time, giving us a wealth of information of very high quality, which enabled us to process the membership applications and be ready in time. The analysis is rock solid, and I have to say that it was quite rewarding, certainly for President von der Leyen, who was in the room, to listen to the heads of state and government praising the Commission for the quality of our assessment that was very well balanced and enable the Council to take the decision that it took. And this will continue. So the Copenhagen Criteria are exactly as they were formulated in 1993, and the European Council confirmed it, also putting emphasis on the EU's own absorption capacity. Of course, we will have to assess the fulfillment of the steps identified by the Commission in our opinions, as we were asked by the European Council. We will do it as part of our regular enlargement report. So we are going to work on one for this year, but this year will cover the Balkans, Western Balkan countries, and Turkey. And then we'll start on the next edition. I mean, it's an annual exercise. We draw on the usual sources of information, including member states' views. I'm jumping ahead to answer one of the questions raised. Of course, we do cooperate with member states, and in the end, they have the final say in the assessment of the fulfillment of any criteria that are necessary to be fulfilled by candidates or potential candidates. Many of you have spoken about Georgia, and indeed our assessment showed that Georgia was not there yet because of a number of reasons, one of them being the political polarization in the country. But I think that the conditions identified are reachable, and if there is enough political will, Georgia can certainly catch up. And this principle of catching up and a common level playing field has applied to the countries in the Western Balkans so far, and we will do the same with the three applicants from the East. Our commitment to the Western Balkans and the enlargement to the Western Balkans is rock solid. There's no changes, and Commissioner Varhelyi was very clear on what we would like to achieve. We are still hoping that we'll be able to reach a decision on opening accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania in the coming days, really. And this has been long overdue, and I think we are pretty close. And we will continue working on Serbia's alignment with the common foreign and security policy. We have been given a specific task on Bosnia. Many of you have raised the issue of Bosnia-Herzegovina. There was quite some discussion at the European Council, I have to admit. and the Council conclusions are clear. So we are going to report on the implementation of the 14 key priorities identified in 2019, set out in the Commission's opinion, trying to assess whether a substantial set of reforms have been implemented in order for the European Council to be able to take a decision on the candidate status for Bosnia. And on Kosovo and the visa liberalization, here our position has not changed. Indeed, we concluded the assessment. We think that the decision on introducing the visa liberalization can be taken now, and we have to revert to the issue as a matter of priority because this decision has been long overdue. Coming to some of the specific points raised by members of the European Parliament and national parliaments, Ukraine needs assessment. Indeed, we applied a cut-off date in our work on the opinion of last December, and now we are moving on with our reconstruction plan for Ukraine, and we already started working with the World Bank on the needs assessment. Of course, it cannot be final as long as the war is ongoing, unfortunately, because destruction is still happening every day. But we will do as much as we can, and then set up, as announced in the communication by the European Commission at the end of May, Ukraine reconstruction platform that we would co-lead and co-manage, the European Commission, with the Ukrainian government, ensuring full ownership and a close link between reconstruction and the reform process on Ukraine's European path. On the question of the impact of the enlargement or the extension of enlargement policies to the three countries on the policy instruments that we manage in the Commission, it's not automatic. Both regulations concerning the IPA instrument for pre-accession countries and NDICI are legal texts, so they would require certain amendments. But for the time being, we can continue working with Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia using the NDICI instrument as it is. And in the communication that I mentioned before, the Commission announced our intention to set up a specific Ukraine reconstruction facility for the future that would be the main tool to work on both reconstruction and the necessary reforms. In conclusion, I see clearly that enlargement, that there is a certain revival of enlargement policy, and it will remain on the agenda of EU leaders for quite some time. And of course, the Commission will continue playing its institutional role as a driver of the enlargement policy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Maciej Popowski. If there are no further requests to take the floor, then this concludes today's Inter-Parliamentary meeting. I would like to thank all colleagues, those connected remotely from the national parliaments, for their participation and insightful contributions on the future direction of enlargement policy, and also to our colleagues here in the European Parliament in Brussels. I guess we agree, and this is how I would sum up today's debate, that the European Union and our 27 member states must continue showing solidarity and also a strategic vision in the context of the brutal aggression against Ukraine. This is a war against the very principles and values on which the EU is based, and therefore I call on the decision makers across Europe to strengthen a joint commitment to a merit-based enlargement process, responding to the legitimate aspirations of the people to live in a free, democratic and prosperous European family. And to Zsolt Nemet and all other national colleagues, let me once again underline what I mentioned. I sincerely hope that this was our last meeting in an online format, and that for the next meeting I will be able to welcome you all here in Brussels for an inter-parliamentary committee. meeting. So once again, thank you for your participation, dear colleagues, and I can now close this point on our agenda, and I would like to inform the AFET colleagues that I would really like to now start with the next item on our agenda, but for that our rapporteur, Mr. Pizzula, would have to be present. Has Mr. Pizzula already been informed by the Secretariat?
He's in the middle of an interview right now.
Pardon?
He's in the middle of an interview right now, I told.
Okay, then I would suggest that we wait until Mr. Pizzula has arrived here in the meeting room, so we'll have a break for a couple of minutes.
Hello? Hello? This is Danica speaking. Did you send a message to get through to you? Hello? Anybody there? Hello? Is anybody there?
So, colleagues, we can continue today's meeting. We now move on to item number 4, the consideration of a draft AFET recommendation on the new EU strategy for enlargement, which follows this year's cycle of individual enlargement reports. In this overarching recommendation, Parliament will set strategic orientations on the future of our enlargement policy. This debate follows last week's historic decision to grant candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova and a European perspective to Georgia, which we just have intensively discussed with parliamentarians from all over Europe. Regrettably, and I want to underline this once again, no breakthrough on opening of membership negotiations with North Macedonia and with Albania has been achieved. As we enter the 124th day of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, we must critically reassess the way we conduct enlargement policy and consider the broader geopolitical implications. It is clear that we need to face up our joint responsibility towards Ukraine. However, we mustn't neglect the Western Balkans and deliver on our promises to the region, redoubling reform efforts in order to prepare for the European Union accession. The EU must put in place sustainable conditions for welcoming new members of the Union. Colleagues, I will now give the floor to Tonino Pizzula to present his draft recommendations on exactly this matter. Tonino, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to present today's draft recommendations of this committee and this House on the new enlargement strategy. Thank you also for entrusting me with this important task at a time when enlargement becomes geopolitically strategic policy after several years of fatigue. Russian aggression on Ukraine had a tectonic impact on many of our policies. I believe we all agree that a new impetus is needed to re-energize enlargement process, ensuring its continuity, consistency, credibility and impact. We followed the Council debate and conclusions last week, the agreement on the candidacy status for Ukraine and Moldova, and the recognition of the European perspective for Georgia as a welcomed, strong political sign of support. With this decision, the scope of the enlargement policy officially extended to the Eastern Partnership countries, and our internal administrative structures and external financial instruments accordingly. In the context of the before-mentioned conclusions and reactions from the Western Balkans, I wish to highlight one of the main messages of the draft text. Each enlargement country should be judged on its own merits. One of our main goals should be to overcome enlargement gridlock by revamping the accession process as a political goal and in terms of its methodology. We need to accelerate integration of the countries that demonstrate strategic orientation and unwavering commitment to EU-related reforms, democratic consolidation and foreign policy alignment. In practice, that also means offering membership-oriented roadmaps of tangible and concrete steps to all aspiring countries by further enhancing revised enlargement methodology. Furthermore, we should establish clear, transparent and consistent performance benchmarks, improve progress measuring and ensure continued political and technical support throughout the accession process. The rule of law should be at the center of the process, prioritizing judicial independence, fight against corruption and organized crime, good governance, human rights, fundamental freedoms and media freedoms. We should strategically apply targeted conditionality based on clear progress benchmarks, rewarding reforms, sanctioning regression or a persistent lack of progress. In the same context, we must put greater emphasis on the alignment of accession countries with the EU's common foreign and security policy. In practice, that would mean stepping up solidarity and interim political and economic incentives for accession countries, ensuring that intermediate integration steps do not substitute but facilitate the final goal of a fully fledged EU membership. And my final remark would be urgent need to recognise Western Balkan countries' achievements by opening long overdue accession talks with North Macedonia and Albania and granting visa liberalisation to Kosovo without delay. European strategic relevance and credibility depend on this decision, and we must not keep missing on confirming our geopolitical ambitions in practice. The people of all but one countries support the EU accession. By delivering on our commitments and showing political leadership, we must make them and our citizens believe that the EU can deliver on its historic mission. This House was always the most prominent supporter of enlargement. With our joint work and by adopting solid recommendations on how the future enlargement policy should be implemented, we can once again set the tone and standards to enable the Union to grow and prosper. We wish to ensure that the EU remains an evolving community of European states open to the accession of like-minded democracies sharing common values and interests. Looking forward to your comments, remarks, and our future joint work on this document. I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tonino, for presenting us your draft. I will now give the floor to the shadow rapporteurs or their replacements, and the first one is our colleague Andrius Kubilius.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot, and of course I would praise what Tonino Pizzula presented as a first draft report. Of course, we shall come with some additional amendments, but definitely it's a very important topic, and it's good that, you know, there is an initiative to draft such kind of report exactly at this time, when I hope that enlargement policy is coming back, you know, to be understood, first of all, inside of European Union as the most important geopolitical policy of EU, and that, you know, this policy will become again ambitious and effective. So, the title, New EU Strategy for Enlargement, should not lead us to some kind of, you know, misunderstanding. I would see it as the same enlargement strategy, but with reinvented its transformative power. And here I would say, you know, that even in last, you know, several decades of our experience, we could see two types of enlargement policy of the same European Union. Here was big bang of 10 countries, with Croatia, you know, following, with dynamic, transformative process, you know, which really brought a lot of, you know, positive outcomes both for applicant countries and for EU itself. And then came Western Balkans, you know, process into Western enlargement into Western Balkans, which unfortunately, you know, because of different reasons, is showing some kind of outcome of impasse, lost trust into enlargement, demotivation for reforms in applicant countries, and definitely lost transformative power. So, from my point of view, what it would be good for us, really, while we understand that, you know, enlargement policy is becoming again very important geopolitical policy, we should start looking into, you know, lessons learned exercise. What was wrong? What, you know, where were our mistakes? Why, you know, really we had this difference of Western Balkans if to compare with Big Bang? And there are, you know, perhaps several reasons, you know, including that some countries wanted to wait for institutional reforms. Then, you know, here became, you know, very popular to try to settle, you know, your own historical pains with the neighboring countries, you know, and so on and so on. So let's start from lessons learned, and then let's look how really to avoid those mistakes, looking into the future, and how to make really again our enlargement strategy ambitious, result-orientated, and really bringing outcomes during the next decade, both for Western Balkans and for Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Andrius Kubilius. For the Renew, Dacian Cholos, please.
Thank you, Chair. I also would like to thank Mr. Pizzula for this good first draft report. It's a subject high on the agenda, and I think beyond the specific subject, we have to be aware that in order to have a successful new strategy for enlargement, we have to take into account some institutional changes internally in the European Union, but this is not the subject of today. I am happy with a lot of ideas proposed by Mr. Pizzula in the report, and I supporting that. I will come with some amendments in order to improve the clarity. As related to the rule of law and independence of the justice, this has already been decided, as I know, as part of the consensus enlargement in 2006, but I also think we need to put this at the center of the process now, taking into account also the advances that we registered for the member states with the new mechanism for rule of law. And I think we have to find a way to use rule of law and the independence of justice not only as a punition for the candidate countries, but also as an incentive to have access to some EU policies in order to encourage them politically to do these hard reforms. For the problem of bilateral disputes, that is something blocking the accession process, and this is rightly stressed in the report. My proposal would be to encourage probably the Council to come with an official mechanism of arbitration. We have seen some initiative of the President of the Council, but I think we need something more now, learning also from the lessons of the past. On the institutional side, I think we have to find a way to involve more national parliaments in the process in order to have also the member states on board, because I expect that to advance with enlargement, we will need to convince a lot of member states, and if not only the governments involved in the negotiations, but also the parliament will be involved, this will be helpful for the process. And I also think as an incentive, we have to find a way to have colleagues from the candidate countries as observer in European Parliament at an earlier stage. Then on strengthening political pluralism, political dialogue or civil society, I think we have to be sure that we will have funds needed to be allocated via IPA or other financial instruments for that, and also to ensure a longer transitional process for this financing, because we know that this process of strengthening democratic transformation process are never over, and especially reinforcing civil society, we can see how important this is. And finally, a very important subject and structural one for me is that we have to come with a proposal for a integrative, phasing in integrative process. And one of the ideas would be that once we close the negotiations of a cluster, we have also institutions in place and legislation transferred to give access to the candidate countries to EU policies at an earlier stage. I have seen something from Mr. Pizzula putting in a report, and I would like to go deepening this idea. Thank you.
Thank you. For the Greens, Tineke Streek.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Rapporteur, Mr. Pizzula. Sorry for being a bit late, but I heard your presentation nevertheless. And thanks a lot for the draft that you put forward. I think all in all, we can support your direction, but we will nevertheless come up with some amendments to improve the text. We very much underline also your approach that it should be a merits-based process the accession and enlargement, but also that we need to actively support the countries in order to meet those criteria that the EU puts forward, and that we also should be credible and consistent in applying these criteria. And what we just also saw, of course, with North Macedonia and Albania, there is this lack of consistency, which creates a huge disappointment in the whole Western Balkan countries, and we really need to take that very seriously, because we need the trust and the credibility in order to keep them engaged to reform the things. And therefore we also very much agree with your proposal to have those in-between steps not decided by unanimity but by qualified majority, so that we cannot have this whole enlargement process in every step, being hostaged by bilateral disputes or national interest. We very much agree with the urgent call for visa liberalization for Kosovo. And regarding Bosnia-Herzegovina, we would like to emphasize strongly also that we need to grant them candidate membership if some in our view, very doable conditions are being met at a short term. For instance, those laws that are still on the table in the Republika Srpska, that they are removed, that all political leaders return to their institutions to let the country function again, but also that the process of constitutional reforms will be resumed after free and fair elections in a more inclusive process, where also civil society and all political parties are involved, really based on the correct implementation of the European Court of Human Rights judgments, without allowing any type of discrimination between citizens. And this would be the real genuine implementation of the case law of the European Court of Human Rights. And I think we need to be specifically critical on the proposals on the table for the electoral law in that regard. Furthermore, we very much support also the emphasis on rule of law performances, and also that we should be consistent no matter which status a country has, even if it's already has accessed the EU, then still we need to have a rigid and consistent application of our standards, and also enforce it and be willing to use all the instruments available. And furthermore, we support indeed to use the money for those rule of law and anti-corruption criteria. And all in all, I think it's very clear that we are supportive, but that we should not stick with granting candidate status, but it comes along also with commitment and engagement with the countries, not only with the political leaders, but also with civil society and all actors in those countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Tineke. For the ID group, Thierry Mariani is the shadow rapporteur, but he's not present. For the ECR, Mr. Jambatsky is the rapporteur. He is also not present. And for the left, Idoia Villanueva Ruiz is the shadow. She is also not present. From colleagues in the plenary, I would like to first give the floor to Michael Gahler.
Thank you very much. I think indeed we should use the momentum now, and therefore I thank Tonino for his draft, and we have already heard also some additional creative ideas. I particularly liked what was said by the colleague concerning observation status for colleagues from these parliaments. I mean, we had it, I recall, in 2004, we started in 2003, but only when the negotiations had finished, and then colleagues from this parliament got an observer status. Perhaps indeed we could and bring that forward to involve colleagues from countries concerned earlier in our deliberations here. Moreover, I feel confirmed my opinion that I had in earlier phases, not to have package deals, so to pack 2 or several countries together and then make the one dependent on the fate of the other one. I think in the given situation with Albania and North Macedonia, I would wish that for the future, and perhaps even in this process, if we cannot solve the North Macedonia-Bulgarian issue, that we might liberate Albania out of this package and get a start with them. I think also when we discuss this momentum, we must insist that what we did not have, unfortunately, in the European Council conclusions, that we must insist as a parliament to have in parallel a new convention. That was this Article 48 demand from the parliament was in our resolution, but we didn't find it in the European Council conclusions. To the contrary, what I hear is that there's a really little appetite to address potential treaty changes, which is of course necessary to do, and I think we should continue to insist in parallel, because if this argument is there, we cannot enlarge because we cannot change, there is little hope to change, then we must at least give it a try and see perhaps that we start with the passerelle clauses that exist and check whether something could be done there. And perhaps one other idea, I heard it from Ukraine, although not officially, but from colleagues. They suggested if the unanimity in some policy areas, if that is a point that is as an argument not to enlarge, because we cannot allow more vetoes to live with in future, then they said, or there were people who said, okay, we could formally abandon this right and say, okay, we come in but are not insisting to exercise our veto right. And that could perhaps even serve as a good example even for member states, not only for candidates, to say, in order to get us moving and to take things forward, why can individual member states not unilaterally abandon their veto right and thereby, if it is many, exercise such an extent of pressure on the others to abandon it as well, that is perhaps the way to proceed. These are some thoughts that I have in this regard. Perhaps I'm coming up with some amendments also. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more request to take the floor. Nacho Sanchez Amor, Bernard Guetta. Okay. These two, and then I'll close the speaking list. Nacho.
Gracias, David.
Thank you very much, David. I think that the key word Tonino has used is credibility. We have shown credibility as part of the European Union in the last few years, in the Brexit crisis, in the resilient funds, in the fight against COVID-19, but we have a lack of credibility in the enlargement, and I like Tonino's document because it's a classical document. There is no experiment. We know the meaning of the enlargement process, and I really like the fact that Tonino is using this classical framework because we are expressing too many enlargement strategies. Many of those strategies are overlapped, so this means that we have no clear strategy. Every 15 days, a leader of a country launches a new model, and that negotiation model is basically an excuse for inaction. And now another topic. The democratic conditionality is related to the political will of the country. Sometimes it seems that the European Union has the moral obligation of turning a country into a democracy that's based on the will of the institutions and the political leaders, and we cannot be substitutes. I have a personal experience of the process in Spain. Spain wanted to be a democracy, a mature democracy, and it wasn't related to the incentives from Europe. Sometimes we are changing the process, and some countries ask us for incentives. I understand incentives to change the economic system, or, for example, to change the administration, but in order to be a real mature democracy, not to fight against freedom of press. We have no incentives for that. And I think that the political will is an essential element that has to be shown by the countries, and it cannot be forced from Brussels. And I think we should always take that into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benedetta.
Oui, il me semble que nous sommes dans la...
It seems to me that in the historical times we're going through, we come under three different obligations. The first one is to enlarge, of course, to those countries that are threatened by the military Russian aggression, but also, obviously, to the Balkan countries. Secondly, the obligation is not to let this vast enlargement and countries, we can't let that paralyze European institutions. And third, we must go fast. We can't continue to disappoint those countries that have been candidates or are going to become candidates by making them wait for 10, 15, 20, or 25 years. So the conclusion is very simple. We must advance fast and undertake to rethink and reinvent our European institutions, which would finally allow us to meet these three obligations. Otherwise, let's not delude ourselves. There will not be any enlargement, not any real enlargement in the medium term, but only in the long term, very long term. So if we are bold and brave, if we want to walk the talk and not lie to candidates, not disappoint them, and offer them to other powers than us who are waiting by and preying on their disappointment, we must proceed to reform institutions, and the Parliament should be the driving force within the Union. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. No further requests to take the floor. I will now hand over to the representatives of DG NIA and the EAS. Mr. Thomas Hackleitner and Ms. Elsa Fennet are both here. So the floor is yours for each 3 minutes. Bitte sehr.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Pizzula, for this report and for the support you put to the EU's enlargement policy, and in particular the own merits principle that you have highlighted. I think you've all mentioned that enlargement is back high up on the agenda. We've seen it last week, where the European Council endorsed the